Yeah, it's like, listen, that, I gotta tell you, I wish it was part of the process. They just all sorts of stuff like that. We went there. Girls were like, "Yes, well, finally I told my son, I said, you just have to go over this class. All, you know, work with the oh, it has a space. So I don't know. And then we left it the same thing we got. Well, it's like, it's just like, they're not a system, they don't have any independence. So we just kind of just driving around by just my years.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Dr. Erin Schulte. I'm Parkway's Coordinator of Counseling and Character Education. And I really want to thank you for coming out tonight because if we know there's one group of people that's really busy, it's parents. So thanks for taking the time out of your day. We here in Parkway are, have been, but I think even more this year, now more than ever, making a more concentrated effort to bring more events like this for parents and caregivers so that we can all work together to make sure our children are healthy and well. And we know that a big part of that is you all at home with them. So I just thank you so much for being involved, for taking the time out to learn, and just be here and care for your children. That helps everyone so much. So thank you for that. I also just want to let you know if there are things from tonight that you're like, oh, I kind of zoned out or I missed it. We are streaming the event now. We'll have the recording available as soon as tomorrow online. So if there's anything you missed and want to rewatch, that will be available to you. And I know you also have a handout and a survey for the end of the night to give some feedback to our presenters and our guests. So I know that's really why you came here, so I won't go on too much longer. But again, just thank you for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful presenters now.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay? Yep. Good. So welcome to Starting the Conversation, Raising Mentally Fit Kids. My name is Kate Tansey, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been in the mental health field for a little over 30 years, and I have a family member that is mentally ill. And that's the reason why I'm here tonight, is I want to talk about that. And so I know oftentimes parents and caregivers, they get a lot of information about how tall their kids should be, and how fast they should walk, and how they should talk, and all of those milestones. But they don't get a lot of information about mental health and mental fitness. So that's what we're here to talk about tonight. And we're really grateful that you are here. We want to thank Parkway and Dr. Schulte for your help in bringing the presentation to you all. So, this is a group of volunteers, really. We're a group of community members that we have members of our families and loved ones that have a brain disorder, some sort of emotional disturbance, and we really feel that for all of our kids to have that well-being and just a safe place, that we all need to learn about mental health issues and how to talk about those. So our mission is really quite simple. We really just want to share our experiences, our strength, and our hope, and the hope that you will role model what we're doing in your own homes and talk about and really help your loved ones and your family members and your neighbors start to think about and talk about mental health issues with their kids in order to be more proactive and prepared when you notice things that aren't going quite right with them and what to do about that. So I just wanted to take a quick poll. And how did you hear about today's event? Anybody? Social media? Okay, a couple people. Thank you. The venue, get some information from the school itself. Yeah, great. Thank you. how about a friend and someone, oh, okay, great. So all different ways. We're just, again, always, we've been doing these presentations for a couple of years, and we just want to get better at it and get more information to everyone. So you just are, again, have the resources that you need to keep our kids healthy and safe. So one of the things I want to do, I'm going to show a little clip of a film. Oftentimes people think mental illness, brain disorders, either you have a problem or you don't. And it's really much more dimensional than that. So this is a little clip from some researchers from the University of Minnesota. And she's going to talk a little bit about that dimensional aspect of mental wellness.
So then, what is mental health? Let's consider the idea that we all have a state of mental health that changes across our lifetimes, despite the presence or absence of mental illness. Mental health is continually affected by many different factors: genetics, relationships, family, physical health, communities, and even government policies. Your mental health ebbs and flows based on the interaction of all these factors. The more these interactions add up to positive influences, the more likely you'll experience what we call optimal mental health. Optimal mental health is reflected in productive activities, fulfilling relationships with others, and the ability to adapt to change and cope with adversity. Conversely, we can experience poor mental health when the interactions of our genes, relationships, communities, and so on add up to negative influences. In these situations, we might experience less productive activities, unfulfilling or unhealthy relationships with others, and challenges in adapting to change and coping with adversity. Because mental health changes across the lifespan and exists despite the presence or absence of mental illness, a clearer way to think about mental health is to consider two dimensions. This model suggests that mental health and mental illness are not opposites on the same spectrum, but rather related and interactive states. For example, a person can experience anywhere from serious mental illness to no symptoms of mental illness. And at the same time, that same person can also experience anywhere from poor mental health to optimal mental health. Let's consider some examples. This is Carly. She was diagnosed with ADHD when she was 7 years old, when her struggles in school became overwhelming and her parents and teachers sought a formal diagnosis in an effort to help her succeed. Carly began receiving therapy from a well-trained clinician. She attended a school with a curriculum that emphasized relationship building and received lots of support from her parents. With effort, Carly was able to excel in her classes in middle school and high school, and now is headed off to her dream college. The road wasn't always easy, but even with her diagnosis, Carly thrived and learned how to cope effectively with challenges and adversity. Carly shows us that having a diagnosis does not make it impossible to also have optimal mental health. This is Emilio. His parents have just divorced, and he feels sad, unproductive, and disconnected from others.
So Emilio's story goes like this. So Emilio, he's failing in school. What the parents notice is that he's not doing well. He's not coping well. So they take him to get some help.
His mother takes him to the pediatrician, who gives him a thorough assessment, but determines that Emilio doesn't meet the criteria for clinical depression. She does give him a book about a boy experiencing divorce, and this helps Emilio understand his feelings. Emilio's parents participate in a program for divorcing families. He's able to join an after-school program that promotes social skills, and he starts to feel better the more he reconnects with people. And soon, Emilio feels like his old self again. Emilio shows us that having no diagnosis does not guarantee good functioning. So with so many factors at play, what does this mean for understanding the...
Okay, so that does a really great job of just showing us again that you have to be prepared for whatever happens to your kid and us as adults along our lifespan, because our mental health can change. And as they talked about, there can be environmental factors, it can be health factors that can really influence that. So in order to protect ourselves and others, we really have to pay attention to that. So what does this mean? Overall, you will experience 1 in 5 kids ages 13 to 18 will live with a mental health condition. And here's the thing that really is the kicker. The average delay on onset with those symptoms and the time an intervention is put in place is often 8 years. That is a very bad pathway for life outcomes. A lot of things can happen and kids will feel better. People will just want to feel better, and sometimes they turn, just like the film shows, to other strategies to stay safe and to feel good. So the earlier we have our eyes on our kids and our ears and everybody open, all of our attention, the better off our kids and we ourselves will be, because we have our own mental health and wellness to really watch out for as well. So what does this mean for our community? So we know that 1 in 5 ages 13 to 18 will have some sort of emotional disturbance, a mental health condition. So in St. Louis County, we have about 1 million people. Of that 1,250,000 are kids 19 and under. So we can expect about 50,000 kids in our community, just in St. Louis County, will experience some sort of emotional condition, health condition. So it's serious, and it's serious enough that we all have to pay attention to that. So I'm going to ask our parents to come up and we'll start the conversation. At the end, we'll have about 10-15 minutes of Q&A. So if you have questions, please, let's have that conversation together. You do have a survey and a list of resources. And outside, we have a number of agencies that have volunteered to come tonight to talk about resources that we have in the community. So please make sure that you stop by and learn about what those resources are. And you do have a list of other resources as well in the information that we gave. So visit with the community resource tables. We will stick around after the program as well. Sometimes people like to come up and chat with us, so we're more than open to do that. And if you, by chance, at your church or in some of your communities, your civic groups, that you would like to have a conversation hosted, we're more than willing to do that. We have a website, and we certainly will stick around and talk to you after that. If there's anybody in the audience that wants to join our group, we'd love to have them. So I guess most of all, we're going to continue to talk about it. And so I'm going to invite our parents and parent group to come on up. I think we can sit hard enough. They won't see it yet.
You first.
So I'm going to start and introduce our panel. I'll start. To my right is Dr. Martin Quinn. Dr. Quinn earned his MD from Baylor College in Medicine and completed a psychiatry residency program there as well. He's now a first-year fellow in the Division of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry at Washington University. Welcome, Dr. Quinn. Thank you very much for being here. Next is Adrian. Adrian's daughter, Maya, was always a social butterfly and did well in school. When Mom and Dad announced they were divorcing, Maya, who was 8 years of age at the time, continued with her life as normal and as usual. Fast forward to age 14, Maya started to break down and attempted suicide by taking over-the-counter NyQuil, the Dayquil tablets. After a long recovery, outpatient therapy and counseling. Maya is now in her late teens, loving life, school, and doing very well in school. 4.1 grade point average with an eye towards college. So thank you very much, Adrian, for being here. Next is Bill French. Bill's father, John, as an adult who now lives semi-independently in a supportive environment after developing schizophrenia as a young college student. Bill's here to talk about their family's experience. And last but not least is Carol. Carol's mother of Avery, who was diagnosed with severe depression and anxiety in 2014. A few months later, she lost her battle and died by suicide at age 17. And Carol will be giving us her experience, strength, and hope as well. So, Bill, I'd love to start with you, if that's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So John has schizophrenia, and can you just tell us a little bit, what was it like growing up with John? His symptoms didn't start until he was in college, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Hey, it's really working. Yeah, my son John, we're a West County family. My son John, Parkway, went to Whitfield. And he was pretty much a normal kid on the swim team, played tennis, played varsity baseball at Whitfield and did very well. And then went off to college for his first year. And candidly, that first year of college kind of fell apart on him. He, like a lot of freshmen, partied a little too much. But what we really didn't realize was a lot of what he was doing was self-medicating, trying to get away from what was really going on inside of him. He came back from school after the first year, and fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, he was asked not to return. Again, my former wife, Heidi, and I were at that point divorced. And so he lived for a while with her, and as frequently happens in separated families, he made the decision he wanted to live with Dad instead, and I think that's probably because Dad's standards weren't at the same level as his mom's standards. She was much better as a disciplinarian than I was. And he, in living with me, started what I would call just odd behavior. Doing things that to me didn't make sense. I'll give you an example of that. He was in a bedroom that was in the lower level, and at night, for whatever reason, he would tie a shoelace between the handle of his door to the handle of the closet in attempts to prevent people from coming in the room, even though there were no people that I knew of that had ever come in that room. And in all due candor, and these, you know, you always think about these things in retrospect, and you think about if I had a redo, the redo here would be, I tended to be a little bit irritated at those things, thought that we had disciplinary problems, thought, get your act together, why are you behaving like that? I think if I had a redo, I would like to sit down with him and just say, John, tell me what's going on. What are you feeling? What are you thinking? Because had I done all of that, I would have learned that he was in the preliminary stages of becoming hallucinogenic. He was seeing people that weren't there. He was hearing voices. Frequently, when you hear about schizophrenia, they talk about voices. John still, to this day, and by the way, John's probably older than a lot of people in this room. He'll be 50 in 2 years. But he still hears voices. The oddity of all of this is he, through medication and time, now understands that these voices aren't the real thing, that there's a difference between the real world and the voices. But I will tell you, the other thing that I saw a lot in the preliminary stages was he had been a very social person in school. And then he began to really withdraw from the world. And he would isolate himself in his room and not come out. And it took me going in and pushing to have him come out before he would come out. And candidly, at that point, as a single person, I really was wishing he had much more of a social life so that I could have more time to myself in my own home. But with that said, schizophrenia is not, at least in my experience, is not something that you can cure. You can cope with it. And John has coped fairly well. Although I will tell you that in the last year, he has been back in mental health environments, behavioral health over at Mercy Hospital. The difference between then and now is John knows when things are going south on him, and he takes himself there. He'll call me up and say, "Dad, I'm on the way."
Thank you, I really appreciate that. So Bill, you know, there was a long time that John didn't have any symptoms. I mean, he was just a regular kid fishing.
Oh, the majority of his growing up, there was no signs whatsoever. I mean,
Yeah.
I thought I had the typical kid who was going to go off to college and get a great job and go on into the world, and I would be there for grandkids, et cetera, et cetera. Sadly, that hasn't happened. I will tell you, though, that there is a real grace about him in a different sense. He knows full well he's been dealt a bad hand, but yet tough to talk about. He's a very caring person. I own a small business, and the people that work in my office, they really help take care of him. And every Christmas, he brings them all poinsettias. So there's such a juxtaposition in this thing. Here's this horrible situation, he's been handed a bad hand, but yet here he is, still concerned about what's happening to other people. And I will tell you, you know, I highly support the organization Independence Center because they are John's lifeline. And every Saturday, I go down to the Independence Center, amongst other times, but regularly on Saturday morning. Or actually Lohmeyer, which is an apartment building that he lives in along with other members of the Independence Center. And Saturday after Saturday after Saturday, I'm the only parent. These people get so disenfranchised by society, it's just heart-rending, because here they are trying really hard. They're nice people, by the way. You know, most of the people I deal with who have mental illness are really nice people. And so they're also quite smart. Most of them are very smart. And it's just very sad to me how they're disenfranchised.
Thanks, Bill, I appreciate that. Carol, I want to talk a little bit about Avery. She too had some symptoms that you were once, she were aware of eventually.
Avery, unfortunately, I found Avery on her bed crying one day, and as a parent, you go through the litany of what's wrong, boyfriend, girlfriend, test, or you know, whatever. And she looked at me and she just said, "I'm just so sad." And I knew immediately, and then she said, "I just don't want to be here." And of course, then I goes, and I was divorced as well. It's like, you don't want to be here, you want to be at your dad, you know, that whole part. And she said, "No, I just don't want to be here." And I said, "Well, we need to go see someone." And of course, as any 17-year-old would say is, you know, I'm not going anywhere, and they don't help and whatever. And I said, I told her, if you're honest with what you're going through, you know, they'll give you coping skills. I said it could be just a chemical imbalance in your brain. I was trying to normalize it as much as you could, like strep throat, if you can, because it's scary for them. I look back on it now, like I said, that was in January of 2014. After being educated on the signs of suicide, I look back on it now, and the signs were there. I just didn't know what the signs were. And it breaks my heart because she might still be here had I been educated. Because we tend to fall on that point, like, you know, she loves me too much, she would never hurt me. It's not about love. It's about, you know, their pain, the demons that were telling her, talking about smart, she was a perfectionist, which, you know, is a cause for concern, because when you set the level here, and you know, you're never reaching that level. She had a 4.4 GPA. She scored a 32 on her ACT as a sophomore. You know, she was two-sport varsity athlete. She was a girl next door. She did everything. She was a party host at Chuck E. Cheese in Ellisville. She was a Lafayette student. And so everything was going her way. But then there were times that, you know, she was concerned about college. Like, she never got a B. You know, so she thought she might get a B+ in AP Lit. And I'm like, you know, talk to your teacher kind of thing. But there were certain things, just like John says, that you go back and you wish if you had known to really pay attention to their behaviors and how long those behaviors lasted. Because they mirror teenage hormones a lot. And we tend as parents just to kind of like, you know, just teenager. But the key point is if those behaviors last for 2 weeks, you seek professional help. And that's one key. I can't look back on her life and say, was there 2 weeks? You know, it could have started in middle school, could have started 8 years prior when she was 9. I don't know. But I do know that she didn't want to die. She wrote that in her letter, but she couldn't take the pain. And the pain that she was experiencing is something that I hope no one, especially a child, has to experience, because as a parent we're supposed to fix them, you know, take them to the doctor. I did all that, and I still lost her 2.5 months later after she saw a mental health professional. So my point of being here and being outspoken is to be proactive. Even if your child, especially talk to people. People here may all think, well, I might have a child that may be experiencing or struggling a little bit. Tell your friends, you know, they hide it well. I mean, there was no drop in grades. There was no, you know, behavioral issues. She was a good kid. And hence, when she passed, people were shocked. But it did have a lot of kids step up to their parents when she passed and said, I think I'm in trouble too. So that's why I'm here. Is Avery had left a legacy of helping others. She just had, she was very empathic, that she could tell when somebody was struggling, and she would go to them and see if they were okay, or dry their tears in the bathroom or whatever. So, and we have education now, and most of our schools should have them by now, legislation for our teachers. And it's not to make our teachers mental health professionals, but they have eyes on your students, a consistent eye on your children for a period of time that can see those little nuances and maybe like, she's been really tired all for 2 weeks now, or, you know, 3 weeks. or something, one of those behaviors, or just not right. Maybe doing their homework, but just not right. And it takes only that one little bit to raise that flag, a yellow flag, for that child to be seen by a professional, just to find out, or just as a parent. Always make them feel that they can come to you, that you will always listen and you will never judge. And that's my story.
Thanks, Carol, I appreciate that. So, Adrian, I'm going to turn to you, and will you tell us a little bit more about Maya? I mean, that was one scary phone call you got from school. And not only did you have to really attend to your daughter's immediate issues, but then she had a re-entry into school, and you had to work with her teachers. And so you talk a little bit about that. And Dr. Wynn will come and weigh in with you.
Yeah, Maya, at the age of 8, we was a happy family. We attended everything together, and then all of a sudden, her dad and I, we got a divorce. And at the age of 8, you're thinking, no, it's okay, the kids understand, she's only 8, she'll be okay. And her and her brother, they were fine at that time, is what we were thinking. So, moving forward, I get a call from middle school. She was in middle school, and they give me a call and tell me that she had taken when I got to the hospital, they told me actually how many pills it was, and it was about 10 to 12 big capsules of the NyQuil. And so I get that call, and they're like, you need to get to the hospital immediately, your daughter's been taken there. At that time, they didn't tell me because she had tried to commit suicide, it was you just need to get to the hospital. I get to the hospital, and all I see is my child laying there. They had already, the doctors did what they had to do, she's laying there, and as the doctors are telling me what's going on, the first thing in my mind is, what did I do wrong as a parent, and how did this happen? Did I not spend enough time with her? Did I not, spend enough time, her and her dad, even though we were divorced? Did we argue? Did she hear us arguing? All these questions are going through my head. And so at the time when she did come to, my question to her is, how are you? And then it's, the immediate shakeup of why, because immediately you want to know why. Why did you attempt this? And at that time, I just had to step back and just, once again, try to figure out. I'm have to be there for my child, but I'm trying to figure out how this happened. So we did the counseling. She did the outpatient counseling. We did, medicine. She had her we went to the private doctors. It was just a whirlwind. And, I had to take off of work because somebody had to actually transport her for that outpatient. And, we had to put that extra love on her. And so, after we did all of that, it was more conversation. Didn't know it was due to the divorce until we got into counseling. She was like, I needed my mom and my dad, So we had to really explain to her at the age of 14, when we're thinking at the age of 8, she knows this. But at the age of 14, it's not your fault, it's okay. But at the time of doing this with her, I wasn't okay because I'm trying to figure out why. Was it me? And every night I'm crying or peeping in her room to make sure it's not going to happen again. Do I leave her by herself? Do I get a sitter? Talking to her, well, you're going to do this again, promise me. But as, Carl was saying, it's not about us, it's not about the love, it's the hurt, that they feel. A little bit of the signs that I seen was she was a social butterfly, but she started locking the door to her room. She started being secluded in her room. She started not eating as much, not asking for her favorite dish. So that's what kind of says something is seriously wrong here. So, fast forward again, we went through the counseling and just the talking and just trying to figure it out. And lo and behold, as I call it, the village. I got my village involved because, the thing is, we always say, don't take what happens in this house out of this house. You don't talk to nobody about how you're feeling. Oh, Auntie Ruby was crazy and things like that. That, affects people. So as we were, you know, going through that, I, you know, had the conversation with her like, what can I do as a mom? You know, did I do anything wrong? And she's just like, I just wasn't feeling myself. I didn't want to be here. I'm just tired. I go, is it homework? Is it this? Is it that? No, mommy, it's just, I don't know how I'm feeling. So I got the village involved, and at this time, she now attends Parkway South High School, and I got Dr. H involved, and I got Dr. Diggs and her counselor, Ms. Sook, and I was like, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna tag team this. If she's not feeling well that morning, I'm gonna call all three of you guys, and we're gonna tag team. We're going to tag team her at school. I'm gonna say, go find her. This is how she feels. If she's in the hallway, ask her how she's doing. If, you know, she's not looking well, you call me. So, you know, we tag team her, and she was just like, wow, you know, all this, not saying she wasn't feel love, but it's like, oh my God, all these people really do care about me. And now she's doing dual enrollment. She attends Parkway South High School as well as Wildwood Community College. She has a 4.16 GPA. She's studying psychology, and she's talking about doing now a double major with education. That was the other conversation. But we, you know, as the weekends come around, it used to be, you know, in passing with your child, oh, how was school, how was this? No, we sit down and we get away from the house, and we still do this to this day. We get away from the house, you know, these teenagers, their favorite place now is Starbucks. Let's go to Starbucks. And we go to Starbucks, we get away from the phones, the books, homework, everything, and we sit there and I'm like, tell me about your week. There's no distractions. Tell me what happened at school today. You know, what happened at school that week. Did you encounter something that made you not feel good? Did you encounter something that just really made you feel good about yourself? Did you encounter a good teacher? Did you encounter a good counselor? Tell me what happened that week. And we've been doing this it's expensive too, you guys. It's expensive. So, you know, now, you know, I'll be like, can we stay at home and get them little packs, them Keurig packs, and you know. But it helped so much because, like I said, we get away from everything. And at that point, you can see and talk to your child and say, what's going on? So, you know, as we're doing it at Starbucks, it's like, okay, now it's to the point where, Mom, I'm good. This is what happened. Yeah, I'm feeling this way. Okay, I got to go do such and such. So, do I still have the concern about her? Absolutely. She's 17 now. You know, as Carol was saying, when it first came about, I'm like, oh my gosh, she's on her cycle. You know, that's what it is. She's just, it's a girl thing. Oh gosh, she's dealing with a boy. He better not break my child's heart. Oh, he done broke her heart, I'm going after him. You know, it's things like that. We kind of talk about that. But it's really them hurting on the inside with everything, just with peer pressure alone and life in general. They are having a very, very tough time. And I can just say, you know, sitting here now that I talked to her about it, and I always tell her as being part of this committee, starting the conversation, I was like, are you okay with it? You're comfortable? She's like, yes. Tell the story, because if it's something that a parent can take out of it, or a child that would help them, that's what I want.
Thank you. One of the things that you said I thought was really important, and you've all talked about it, is normalizing their feelings and what they're going through. Being able to talk about those feelings and having that emotional intelligence is so important. Even for John. John's experience, it's normal for him. You know, for someone with schizophrenia, what he's experienced, the delusions, the voices, those sorts of things, it's normal for him. What isn't normal is that he goes for those, and now he's been able to discern. So, you know, there's real help out there, and there's real treatment that works. Is it hard? Yes. But it's not if we talk about it. Not if we really start to understand it and get out in front of it. So, Dr. Wynn, tell us a little bit about when is it appropriate for parents to get help? Talk to us a little bit about your experience.
So first off, thank you to the three of you for sharing your stories. I'm really just I'm humbled by your courage and your strength. So thank you again for coming here and sharing just something that's just very vulnerable and very raw. and hoping that other parents and other kids can learn from your experiences. So thank you again very much. I wanted to talk about two things. First off is recognition, second step is prevention. So first off, as far as recognition, what are kind of the warning signs that we want to recognize in our kids and our teenagers whenever they might be having a mental health issue? As Kate was alluding to earlier, we want to see, or we hope we don't see a pattern of our kids just having more trouble sleeping, whether it be they're having trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, or sleeping too much. If your kid just starts taking more naps on the weekends or in the middle of the day, that's something to keep an eye on. If you find that they start caring less about the stuff that they used to care about, you might ask them, oh, how was like soccer practice? How was cheerleading? And they say, okay, and they say okay over and over again. Or they just kind of stop engaging in those activities, or they feel like dropping those activities or just outright quitting. If they feel like, if you notice that they just have a change in their personality and you can't really explain why, and even if you can't explain why, whether it be a divorce or a breakup or losing a friend, something that's trivial to you or not that important in the grand scheme of things to you, may be their entire world to them. That's just how it is, and it's real to them and it's important to them. If you notice changes in their appetite, like if they start skipping more meals, not eating as much dinner, if they're eating too much, or if it seems like they're just not enjoying food as much, I think that's another kind of warning sign. You know your kids better than we professionals do, so if you notice just a change in just who they are as people and their personalities, and it lasts like a week or even 2 weeks, then that's a sign that you should talk to someone. So who should you talk to? I would say the other adults and other people that they know very well. It could be their siblings, if you trust their siblings. It could be their teachers, their clergy, if you belong to a spiritual community. It could be their coaches, it could be other mentors, it could be other family members as well. One thing I want to emphasize is that our kids won't tell us everything. That's okay. That's not necessarily because they don't trust us or they don't love us. Sometimes it might be because they're trying to protect us from just how much pain they're dealing with in the inside. And just because they tell everything to their counselor, their teacher, their sibling, and they don't tell you everything, does not make you less of a parent, does not make you a bad parent, does not mean that they love you any less or that you love them any less. It's hard to talk about these things. Sometimes it's harder to talk about them with the people we love most. So what do you do whenever you're concerned? I think the first people to contact would be, again, just to get more information. Other family members, people in your religious or spiritual community, their teachers, other adults that they talk to, scout troop leaders, coaches, other folks like that, and just to get more of a pulse on what's actually going on. Once you decide that once your gut has told you you actually have to do something, I would say the first option is to make an appointment with your pediatrician. Quote-unquote simple depression or simple anxiety is seen a lot by our pediatricians, by our primary care providers, and those primary care providers do have experience in prescribing medication or referring to therapy for these conditions as well. For those of you who have girls, sometimes their OBGYN can help with such things, with mental illness as well. It doesn't mean they necessarily have to go straight to a psychiatrist like myself or a therapist, but making that first step with a primary care provider is a good step. Another thing you can do, since I know we're concerned about money and whatnot, you can always call your insurance company, look at those numbers in the back of your cards, and ask for someone who's in network for y'all. I know it's a difficult and expensive journey, as Adrian mentioned, but one of the first things you can do is just call your insurance, just look up the numbers in the back of the card, let them know your situation. They can find someone who's in network that you can see relatively quickly. And above all, if your gut tells you that your child might be in danger of hurting themselves or someone else, do not hesitate to call 911. Do not hesitate to take them to an emergency room. It doesn't have to be a children's emergency room like Cardinal Glenn or St. Louis Children's. It can be an adult one as well. And sometimes kids just need a space just to take a break from the world for a couple hours and just to talk about it with someone else. Sometimes just talking about it with someone who they hopefully won't have to see ever again is what it takes. But you know your kids best. don't feel like you have to do this alone. You can always call 911 or the emergency room. Next thing I want to talk about is prevention. First up, what can you do for their physical health, since their physical health plays such an important role in their mental health? Sleep, diet, and exercise. Let's break that down. Sleep. I personally don't think our kids sleep enough these days with screens and early start times, but your child should be getting at least 8 to 9 hours of sleep a night. That means good sleep hygiene. That means no electronics past 9 or 10. That means, if necessary, keeping the electronics in your bedroom instead of their bedroom. That means accepting that they may have to wake up later than you all, and that doesn't mean they're lazy or lethargic. It just means that they just need more sleep than the average adult. So they need a good 8 to 9 hours of sleep, and that means removing as much disruptions as possible from the room. So Google sleep hygiene, look up all the different tips and tricks about how we can help them sleep better without needing medicine or something else. Next up is diet. Your pediatricians may be telling you this, but your kids shouldn't be eating fast food more than once a week, shouldn't be drinking soda more than once a week, shouldn't be having caffeine past 4 p.m. on a given day. I think that unfortunately, sometimes unhealthy eating leads to just unhealthy feelings as well. Lastly, exercise. It's just something that unfortunately we don't do enough of as a country and as a society. And it's really sad that a lot of schools have cut back on recess time or gym time and other stuff that I think is essential to our kids' mental health. So they should be just staying active. Doesn't matter necessarily how, but I would say at least 30 to 60 minutes a day. The last thing I wanted to mention is differentiating adult versus pediatric anxiety depression. One thing that I feel like we don't recognize enough is that kids are more likely to be angry or irritable whenever they're stressed out. We often think that if they're depressed or anxious, they'll be more worried or more sad, and that is true oftentimes. But a large part of pediatric depression and anxiety is actually anger. And you may be tempted just to blame them or blame their moodiness or hormones or blame yourself. But I think that's also a warning sign that we often tend to brush off, is sometimes they get more angry. But above all, just trust your gut. And if you feel like they need help, call your pediatrician, call the other trusted adults you know, and if necessary, call 911 or take them to the emergency room.
Thank you, Dr. Twin. That was really a nice overview of symptoms and just what to do about that. I wonder if we can talk a little bit about stigma. I think, Adrienne, you mentioned it, like what stays in the house, what's done in the house stays in the house, and I'm sure you all have had different experience. I know I have. And there's two different types. There's social stigma, so I'm worried what you all will think of me if I get help. Social, something outside of me. And then there's personal stigma, that I feel horrible about me because I might need help. And so I'm not going to tell anybody because I'm fearful. So stigma is a big deal. Can we talk about that?
And I think it's more of ashamed. You're ashamed that your child is going through this. You, as I said before, you don't take it out the house. If mommy and daddy is having this conversation in the house, or whatever's finances is going on in the house, it stays in the house. So therefore, you may just fix it on that, but the child takes it as everything stays in this house. You don't take it out. I don't care if you got to talk to anybody. You just don't do it. So it came out to being, I had to recognize that. I had to make sure that I was giving her the okay to say, if you're feeling this way, go talk to your counselor, go talk to your older sister, go talk to your brother, go talk to someone you trust, my sisters or something, because it's okay, for you to do that. If you don't want to talk to me, I'm fine with that, but find someone that you trust, that you can talk to. And I can't say, to this day she has, my sister she talks to, but she also, I'm chalking up Parkway here, but she talks to her counselor and her principal. She loves Dr. H. She loves Dr. Diggs. She knows she can count on them. She knows she can go talk to them and things will be okay. And as a parent, I trust my child with them to know that if she goes and talks to them, that I don't have to sit back and worry, does this counselor or principal or teacher really have my child's best interest at heart?
Stigma?
Stigma.
Now I can talk a lot about stigma. First of all, understand, my son's schizophrenia really was what they refer to as young adult onset schizophrenia, meaning that as an adolescent, it wasn't really that evident. So in essence, his mental illness began to manifest itself as a young adult and then has persisted through his adult life. His treatment, first of all, I'm always just confounded by the amount of ignorance there is out there and lack of understanding about mental illness. I would like to have $1 for every time I've been told, well, has he ever gone to see somebody, and has he talked to anybody? As if he had cancer, somebody could talk him out of it. His mental illness is truly a mental disease as opposed to a bad mood or a situation. In addition to that, being involved in Independence Center, as well as being part of my son's life, I regularly work with, am associated with, and with people who suffer from mental illness. And probably the most profound thing that I see, which I referred to earlier, is the parking lot down at Lohmeyer on Saturday. I cannot tell you how many of these people who are living with mental illness, their families have really completely disassociated themselves from these really kind, nice people who just have a mental illness. And most of the people that are living with John down at Lohmeyer do not have families that are taking care of them. As a result, they have formed their own little families. Their adaptation to me is just amazing because John, as I said earlier, had a breakdown this last year, had to be admitted to Mercy Health, and I can't say enough good things about them, by the way, Mercy Health Behavioral Health. But every time I went down to Lohmeyer to get a new pair of socks or a pair of shoes for him or whatever, everybody there was asking, how's he doing? We haven't seen him, we've been concerned. So it's amazing to me how an organization like Independence Center, by bringing people with the same problem together, they end up supporting each other more than frequently the families do. That disenfranchisement, the stigma that's associated with the mental illness is the part that is hardest for me to really understand and explain, because these are not people that deserve that.
When Avery was diagnosed with severe depression and anxiety, I told her it was a brain disease, no different than heart disease, liver disease, to again normalize it, not to minimize it by saying it's like strep throat, but that she had a disease. But I told her that a lot of people didn't understand mental illness. So I told her, I said, there's nothing to be ashamed about, that you can tell any friend that you want to, but be prepared for a friend to step back, to step away. I said, it's not because they don't love you, it's because they don't understand, and it scares them. So in a way, I think she tried to educate some of her friends that knew about her of what she was going through, are her feelings of sadness and hopelessness. So I look at the stigma of suicide, especially since she ultimately took her life. And I'll just tell you one quick story. Sitting at her grave at Holy Cross, her new grave, people would come up to me because I lived up there pretty much for a long time, and people would come up to me and say her picture was there on inside of a wreath, and they'd say, "Oh my gosh, how old was she?" And I said she was 17, and they go, "She's sick?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "She had a brain disease, mental illness, and she took her life." And some people would be like, oh, a gasp at it, and other people would be like, "I'm so sorry." But I don't define my daughter by the way she died. No different than you would define a relative that died of cancer. By dying by cancer, you define it by how they lived. And one other quick thing I just wanted to add onto the doctor here. When you do call, and this is part of I have a little foundation that we're trying to work on. I call it our Bridge Project. When you call a mental health professional, especially a pediatric psychiatrist, you may wait a month, and I called one when Avery was struggling, that was 6 months to get in. Okay, well that's not exactly the best, thing. You want somebody to see in like 48 hours when they're struggling. All those people that are out here, and there's plenty more of them too, are the people you need to know about. Because if your child does struggle to the point that, like, okay, we've got to take the next step to see a mental health professional, but I can't get in 2 days or 24 hours, there's people out there that have free programs, peer-to-peer programs where you get your child into where they don't feel so alone with what they're feeling, programs for parents to kind of understand what they're going through, the signs of suicide. So that's why it's so important that these people are here, because had I known about them while we waited for Avery to get in, I could have learned kind of some of the things that we're talking about today. And again, that's my problem. Maybe I should have Googled it. What do I do when my child is struggling? And so our goal is to go to every pediatric psychiatrist and say, if you can't, or counselor or whatever, if you can't see somebody, if they're in crisis immediately, then please ask them to contact one of these resources while they wait, because it can save their life.
Thanks, Carol. I want to be respectful of the time and open it up to questions from the audience, if you have any. While we're waiting for that, one of the things I wanted to remind people too is for more information, because that's the important piece, and you all talked about it beautifully, is that the more you arm yourself with correct information, just the more powerful you'll be in terms of watching out for your loved ones as well as others. But there's courses here in our community called Mental Health First Aid, and it's a course. They have one for adults and one for children, because as Dr. pointed out, there's different symptoms and onsets. And they're marvelous. I mean, the information that you walk away with really helps you protect yourselves and others in a way that you couldn't if you didn't take the course, and they're free. So most of the providers, the vendors outside, will have information about mental health first aid. It's an evidence-based practice, and really we all need to take it and retake it, because you just really need to keep it first and foremost in mind. Here's a question.
This is for the doctor. Can you talk about having conversations with children when they're very young, and how young can you start talking to them about their mental health, and how you recommend parents have those conversations?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the youngest patients that I've seen so far have been 5, and WashU does have a preschool and infant psychiatry clinic, so you could go even younger than that as well, as strange as it sounds. I think the first thing that parents can do is whenever they notice, if you notice your young child is not having a good time, first thing to do is just to check your own pulse, see how you are reacting. Are you yelling as well, along with their yelling? Are you standing up as well? Are you pacing around as well? Let's stop that. Let's sit down. Sometimes sitting down on the floor with them and just being there with them, sitting still with them can help. Speak slowly, speak softly, and let them know that you know they're not okay and that it's okay to not be okay. Pause, and sometimes you just need to wait. And at least for the young ones, sometimes you might try distracting them with another pleasant activity. You might offer them their favorite snack, you might offer them a favorite book, you might find something that they typically like doing. If you notice that your young child is just struggling more and more kind of long term, like days at a time or weeks at a time, I think you can just be very upfront with them and just tell them that you notice that they're feeling sad or that they're feeling mad. You can Google these things called feeling wheels or feeling charts. Sometimes they have the little faces on them, and sometimes kids, if they can't read or they don't know the words for how they're feeling, sometimes they can just pick how they're feeling. I think the first step is just to model what it's like to express one's emotions beyond yelling or breaking stuff or throwing stuff. Because I think with the younger kids especially, usually feeling more mad or feeling more aggressive is the best way that they can express their emotions. That's a great question though.
And you don't have to wait until there's a issue. I mean, you can start talking to them about their feelings with the feeling wheel. Oh, hey, sweetie, how are you feeling today? Happy. Oh, that's cool. Why are you happy? Again, just make a whole conversation out of it, and that builds that emotional intelligence that we all need. So, yes, there's another question up here.
I was wondering if some of the parents could comment, when you get an inkling or a nudge where you feel like your child could benefit from some help, you mentioned reaching out to the pediatrician, which makes sense, but there's psychiatrists out there and there's counselors, and there's lots of different kinds, and it's almost overwhelming to know, can you share some of your experience of, is it counselors you need, is it psychiatrists, do you start with one, some of those tips?
I don't think it necessarily matters whom you start with, as long as it's just with someone. All mental health professionals are trained in the most basic skill of all, which is to talk to our children whenever they're undergoing distress. Doesn't matter if they're a psychiatrist, a physician like myself, or a psychologist, or a social worker like Kate over there, or an LPC, or even clergy. I don't think there's necessarily a certain order that you should do it in. I think I suggested pediatrician just because it might be easier to get in with your pediatrician than it may be with a specialist, as we learned from Carol's experience with Avery. I would be curious to see what the other parents thought.
I think with Maya, I made a couple phone calls, and as Carol said, it was hard trying to get her to see someone immediately. And it was like, it's a 3 weeks wait. Well, I might not have 3 weeks. I need somebody now. So we went through that, and then she did the group counseling, which, at that point in time, she hated group counseling. She wanted to talk with someone one-on-one. And so I told her she had to finish the group counseling, and then we would get the one-on-one person. And then at that time, when she was doing the group counseling, I was still setting up the one-on-one. So it kind of interacted. Right after the group counseling was done, she went straight to the one-on-one doctor.
In my own experience, first of all, John was of age, So it wasn't as if you could tell John what to do and he had to do it. He had to do it voluntarily. In that case, he was involved with I would call a social worker, counselor, explaining what was going on with him. But unfortunately, things progressed beyond that, and he just suddenly disappeared. We had no idea where John was, and he was gone for about a week before he finally showed up again. And then he tried to kill himself. He bought some razor blades and slit his wrist. At that point, fortunately for him and us, he had second thoughts and drove himself to Mercy Hospital's emergency room, and they took him in. Then it was judged that he was a danger to himself or others, and as a result, he was already at home at that point, so we were able to obtain a court order. I will say, and this is not throwing stones, but the police picked him up, and I've never seen a bigger overreaction in my life. 5 squad cars showed up at Forum West apartment building up here to take him into custody. And even today he explains it as, here I was just enjoying my afternoon, and suddenly here are 5 police cars surrounding me, and I'm like, what the heck is going on here? But he was then taken into the state mental health system. And you know, people tend to, at least in my experience, people tend to think of the state mental health systems as some kind of draconian environment. In fact, they were very, very good and very professional about the way in which they handled John. And after that, then we were able to take him beyond it. But because we were dealing with a different form of mental illness, and he was at that point very delusional, seeing people that weren't there, had attempted suicide, etc. He at that point needed to go way beyond just seeing a counselor, and got involved in the mental health system. And it really was a matter of then getting medications that would assist him in coping with his life.
After the conversation with Avery on her bed, I called her pediatrician, made an appointment there, went to see him. He recommended 3 psychiatrists for her. I contacted all 3 and we chose one. While we were waiting to see the psychiatrist, I also had her see a gynecologist. And because I felt it was important to check the physical part of her to make sure that there was not some underlying condition while I was waiting.
Yes.
Can I, and I'll talk loud, you don't even have to bring it up. And I'm only aware of this, I'm with NAMI St. Louis, so, and doctor, you may be aware of this. The Missouri Child Psychiatry Access Project allows for pediatricians to talk to psychiatrists to get children on, medication or get something relatively quickly. So I think it's getting better where, you can take your child to get in to see their primary care physician, their pediatrician much quicker, so that hopefully, because it does take so long to get into a psychiatrist, they can maybe get them started on some sort of medication to get them through till they can actually get in. So, thought I'd mention that.
Yeah. So the psychiatrist is actually supervising the pediatrician?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So they're getting, more help with that.
Correct.
Another resource I wanted to give to everyone is a website called psychologytoday.com. So this website, you go to psychologytoday.com, you type in your zip code, and it'll give you hundreds of different psychiatrists, psychologists, and therapists in your area. How in the world do you filter between that? It's almost overwhelming, right? So you can filter on the left side by insurance, by the gender of the therapist or psychiatrist. You can filter by what areas they specialize in. You can filter by whether or not they see children or teenagers or just adults. You can filter by all kinds of things, and hopefully that will narrow it down to, say 10 different people. Okay, where do you go from here? You and your child, if they're old enough and they want to be involved, they should be involved. Go through those different websites, go through the biographies, and just see what kind of clicks. This is kind of like dating in a way. You're not going to find a right fit right off the bat, probably. And then once you narrow it down even further, maybe it's around like 5 or 6 or so, you call each of those numbers and you kind of ask them kind of the same obvious questions, like, do you take my insurance? Do you treat anxiety? Do you treat depression? How do you treat it? What's your philosophy? Do you allow, young children in the room? Will you collaborate with me as a parent? Will you allow babies in the room? Sometimes that happens. And they will probably all say roughly kind of the same thing, but I want you and your child to figure out how do they say what they say? How do they respond to your questions? Because that's, again, kind of like dating, how they answer your questions is probably going to help you more than what they actually say. It will help you better in terms of finding the right fit for a therapist or a counselor or a psychiatrist. So psychologytoday.com, free website, great website.
Tonight we're talking about stigma. 1 in 5 people suffers from some form of mental illness. And my guess is that if you are feeling the stigma and you don't feel like talking to others about it, that may be part of the problem. I think, in fact, if you begin to reach out, as I have, what you begin to find is a lot of your friends and associates may have already dealt with this, and they're just not telling you. And getting that conversation going and saying, look, I'm experiencing this, they may suddenly go, well, you know what, I know somebody, or I have worked with this person, or whatever. That may be of assistance to you.
Absolutely. Yes.
Is there a threshold on mental illness before it starts to affect your life? As I've gone to get help from the school, we're debating on whether or not my daughter's diagnosis is severe enough to affect her life. So I'm wondering if there's a threshold where the young man in the video, he just needed some time to adjust, where somebody else has a diagnosis. So are there levels?
I think that's the point of the video, is that it is dimensional, and it depends. It depends on what the situation is. Is there a diagnosis? Is there not a diagnosis? What are the circumstances that surround it? So there's no hard and fast answer to that. But the threshold is if that individual isn't functioning well, if there isn't the ability to function, to go to school, to have relationships, to have a life that has meaning and purpose. That might be kind of hard for a 5-year-old in terms of the meaning and purpose, but they do suffer if things are not going properly. And I think, Dr. Wynn said it really well. You have to trust your gut as a parent. And oftentimes we'll blow it off to say, oh, that's a phase, or, they're just doing that. And we're just saying, we'd rather you err on getting some help and asking, is this right? And talking to your pediatricians before there's an issue. What if I had this issue and I came to you? What would you do? What would we do? How would we handle it? So, again, we're being a lot more preemptive and thinking about it. And again, this is a lifespan. It's not just, 1 to 13. Our situations change all the time, even for us. So us really being mindful and watchful for those kinds of things. So that's a great question about the threshold, and it's a kind of a shoddy answer, but it depends.
Can I add one comment though? I mean, just seeing your pain already, I think at that point, seeking some help, it's affecting you as a family. I mean, it affected my family. And, you know, when it's affecting you as much as what I just saw just now, I would be looking for some
No,
help.
I'm well
Yeah.
equipped. We've got the therapists, we've got the drugs, we've
Good.
got the workbooks,
Perfect.
you know, we got it. It's just, we need to go another step.
Yeah.
Going back to stigma, I think something that is definitely on a preventative side is how can we fight stigma as parents or as siblings is by modeling modeling healthy mental health ourselves. So if we're struggling, we can tell our kids, you may notice that, mom or dad, we've been just not ourselves lately. We've been more upset, we've been more snappy. And we're getting help for it. We're talking to our counselor, we're talking to our pastor, our priest, we're talking to a doctor about it, we're talking to a special doctor about our feelings. You don't have to go into the gory details, but just modeling that behavior, even if they're very young, to let them know that it's normal to have these feelings and it's normal to ask help for it, will set them up later on whenever they open up to you about what they're going through.
And to the mom here, it's okay to cry. I still cry. You react to your feelings. If it's crying, if it's talking, if it's a hug, I'll give you one after this. But sometimes we need the support. I know that I have not just my family and friends, but I have the Starting the Conversation organization to help me, because like I say, yes, she was 8, now she was 14. She's 17 now. Do I still feel it? Yes. Sometimes I'm like, okay, I have to trust her, but I sit back and I'm like, oh my God, and I still cry too. So it's okay to let those emotions go, because you have to take care of yourself, and you have to know that it's okay, and the pain that you're feeling and the emotions that you're feeling is okay.
So just out of respect for your time, we will stay here and answer any questions and continue the conversation. So please visit the vendors. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I'll just, I'm Keith, my superintendent, this is Debbie Hopper, board vice president. We just want to thank all of you, and all of you who came tonight. I just want to let you know that through the Board of Education support, Parkway put together a mental health task force last year. And one of our major efforts is to partner with groups like Starting the Conversation and others, Aaron Schulke, Mike Barrelick, who is our director of social and emotional needs, is doing a lot of work. So I just want you to know we're on a journey here. We know that we've got a lot of work ahead. This isn't something that's we're going to take care of in 1 year. We recognize that public education is now going to have to see this as something continuous. Our ability to do academic work is going to be also in partnership with our ability to raise healthy, social, emotional, strong, mentally healthy young people. So I appreciate this so much. I know Aaron does, and our Board of Education is tremendously supportive of this work and encouraging us to do everything we can to develop more structures, more personnel to deal with the problem, reach out and work with our community and have these kind of conversations. So we're very appreciative, and thank you very much for all your time. And parents, please know that we'll continue this work, trying to have these kind of opportunities.
Thank you, Superintendent. We really appreciate that. And for hosting us, thank you to our parents. You and Dr. Wynn, you're just all amazing. I'm going to ask you again, visit the vendors. We have a survey. Please fill that out. We'd just love to have your feedback. And thank you. You have resource sheets as well. And just thank you, and please talk about it. Thank you.